Talking about plumbing, I mean, if you talk about 100 gig and 400 gig, it's plumbing. It's basically make sure that everything goes faster to wherever you want to do it, for wherever you want to send the data to. So what are the drivers? I mean, what would you actually learn from when we deployed 100 gig E? I mean, one of the major drawbacks from 100 gig E was availability of optics. So we had the standard, but the optics vendor were pretty late on developing like the optics for 100 gig E. With 400 gig E, it's a little bit different. A lot of the, and I will talk about it a little bit later, a lot of the optics vendor didn't want to make the same mistake. So on the optics side, and by the way, we are not an optics vendor, as you probably can tell, but on the optics side, a lot of the optics vendors now go ahead of had already looked for new standards and basically are ready to deploy 100 400 gig E. So in different types of optics. So what are the drivers? I mean, like I said, it's and with the courtesy of Google and Facebook. What you will see here on this slide is actually, this is the egress data, and this is like internal data. So the number of internal data from server to server increases like humongous. And as you will see, the first use cases for 400 gig will be within the data centers. And so there's actually some quite practical use cases on that as well. If you look at like common data center spine leaf architecture, why you want to use 400 gig E. And it's not really to deploy 400 gig E connections, but look at the capabilities of the ASICs, and we'll talk about that in a second. One of our customers actually drove it down to lower cost per bit, lower cost of lower power per bit. It's about basically getting the most out of the dollar you spent or the euro you spent on optics or on the plumbing. So we can see the expected uptake from 400 gig, and as a networking vendor, we already have the 400 gig E, and we have actually customers deploying it. And the uptake is actually substantial. I mean, it's getting there. And by the end of the year, a lot of the optics will be available. So we expect quite a bit of uptake. Same with 400 with 800 gig. So with 800 gig, I mean, the current OSFP standard will allow potentially 800 gig E transmission, but those are not yet set yet. So what makes this possible? It's merchant silicon. I mean, if you look at switching ASIC capabilities over the last 6 years, you will see a double of the density, double of the feature richness of an ASIC every 2.5 years. So this one is, for instance, the Tomahawk 3. So the Tomahawk 3, what it has on a single chip are 32 ports of 400 gig E. I mean, 2 years ago, it was really revolutionary to have like 32 ports of 100 gig E on a single chip. Now, a couple of years later, we have basically 4 times the density on a single ASIC. And this makes this a rather interesting solution for a lot of the vendors to build 400 gig E systems. So it's not only that we have the 400 gig E on this ASIC, but also the capability to break out. I mean, 400 gig, 32 times 400 gig E gives you also 128 times 100 gig E. And that's quite an interesting use case as well. Next one is for instance, in the same series, also from Broadcom, the Jericho 2 chipset. I mean, this doesn't have the port density of the 32, but it has 12 times 400, but it has other capabilities. And recently, Broadcom also announced the T4. which again has like very high density, 32, 400 gig, but a lot of the additional features that also come with the ASIC. So, what are the drivers? What are the use cases for upgrading to 400 gig? I mean, like I said, it's not like immediately go to 400 gig on your links, but the capability have on a single 1U box, where you used to have like 32-100, now you have a 32 by 400. And with the proper breakout cables, you can increase your spine suddenly very much horizontal. I mean, you can go from 32 ports, you can go from 32 leaves, suddenly you can go up to 128 leaves. And with the server-to-server communication, this is basically a × 4 upgrade to the existing data center with existing cabling, with existing, well, to a certain extent, optics. I mean, then there might be some optics changes required, but basically this is a relatively cheap upgrade for your data centers on the spine layer. This is and coming back to the optics, I mean, this is on the left side, on the green blocks here, you can see the 100 gig E optics they're using to upgrade a data center from 100 gig to 400 gig. And on the right side, these blocks are the 400 gig E optics. So you can see that from a top to rack, leaf to top, leaf to tor, spine to leaf, spine to colo, and so on, they're optics. It's not like you have to wait for ages and ages and ages for providing, or the optics vendors to provide the right 400 gig E optics, but the optics are partially there, and by the end of this year, a lot of them will be available. So what is different from a technology perspective? And I must say I'm not an optical guy, but basically this is like 100 gig E eye chart. So we use the non-zero return on that, on the modulation. And with the 800 of 400 gig E, we use PEM4. It's pulse altitude modulation. And so we basically have 4 different values coming out of the thing. And this is actually quite important if you want to mix and match or break out 400 gig to 100 gig E, because there are some subtle differences which you have to take care of when you try to start deploying these. So what is the major difference? So on the 100 gig E switches, you typically have the 4 by 24 SATAs, and with the 400 gig E, we have 8 by 50. And that means that existing 100 gig E who are using 4 by 25 are not by default interoperable with the 400 gig E's. So you see that, and this also, if you just go back a couple of slides on the ASICs, you will see that there are, on the ASIC side, there are different ports which actually do support 4 by 25, and others only do like the PEM4 modulation. But this is, in principle, the whole thing you need to know about the optics. So what kind of optics are upcoming? So we can see the server copper optics, typically the DAC cables. We have the AOC cables, and then there's a variety. And the variety also is distinguished or can be separated between single mode, multi-mode, but also on the connector side. There are different types of connectors. I mean, there are the existing LC cables, there are existing MTP or MPO cables, but there's also like a double density LC cable. The good thing about the 400 gig E, there's a ZR plus standard also available, which basically provides you the long haul interfaces for your 400 gig. So quickly on the form factors. So there are 3 of them. QSFP or CFP8. Well, we all know the CFP2s and others. They are big, bulky. You don't get a lot of density in there, but it has because it's big, it can hold a larger power budget. So with large power budget, we can drive the length of the signal. So this is on the CFP8. The challenge here is that because of the limited number of SerDes the optic supports, 800 gig is questionable. Where with the next standards, that's the QSFP-DD or the OSFP. The OSFP, at least, they will support 800 gig E. With the QSFP-DD, it depends. I mean, one of the nice things about the QSFP-DD is it's backwards compatible. So it's backwards compatible with the QSFP 100 or 28s, but it has some challenges because it's bigger. It kind of sticks out of the front panel, and cooling can be a challenge there if you have, let's say, ZRs or ZR plus interfaces. OSFPs, these are a new opticals, it's octal SFPs, and it's designed around 400 gig E. It has the capability of supporting, lots of different SerDes, and most likely this will be supported for 800 gig E as well. Other things to make. I mean, obviously, if you have already 100 gig E, there will be like a OSFP to QSFP adapter, which basically can be inserted into a port, and then it will be like a regular 100 gig E port. On the, let's say, breakout, I mean, this was most likely, or is most likely the most important use case in the near future, is breakout. There are a couple of options. So for instance, you can break out the SR8 to 2 times 200 gig, or there is this BiDi interface. We already have probably a lot of you using the 100 gig E BiDis. There is a breakout from 400 gig E BiDi to 100 gig E BiDis. And there's a new optic coming up, which is basically the DR4 to 100 gig DR. And basically this transforms like the PAM4 to the NRZ modulation. So this is and I mean, one of the challenges probably you will be facing is, do you want to have like fan-out cables in your spines? I mean, breaking out 400 gig into 4 times 100 gig E with breakout cables can be, well, different in your data centers. But this is basically the use cases we see for 400 gig at this moment. So with this, I'm done with my lightning talk. So light up your fibers with 400 gig preferable. And if you have any questions, I will be here around, and so are some colleagues as well. So thank you so much.
I have one question.
Yes.
If you look into these 400 gig optics, will you like lose an eye, or is it fairly safe?
No, actually, don't ever look into optics, whether they are 10 gig or 100 gig or 400 gig. Don't do it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I mean,
well, there's Arjen.
Arjen, okay.
Your eye is not transparent for 15 nanometer light, so it doesn't get in. But I have a question about the silicon.
Yeah.
It's nice that they can do 400 gig, but what about frame rates?
Sorry?
What about the frame rates? See, Ethernet is a discrete frame protocol. So the number of frames it can switch is usually at least with the 100 gig when I was still involved in that kind of work. The silicon could not keep up with the frame rate. It could keep up with the data rate, but what about the frame rates? Frames per second, yeah.
Turning out of my head, I don't have the answer for that. I have to check on
Because
the specifications.
what happened was that the silicon vendors started to use statistics. So they say, okay, we have an internet mix. It's small packets with X and big packets with data.
Yeah,
and
it's still an internet mix. I mean, and that depends a little bit on the ASICs itself. But there will be, if you have, let's say, all small packets going on all 32 ports or 400 gig, yes, there will probably be some.
Won't perform on the. Okay.
But most of the vendors, I mean, now have also the data available for even these extreme small packets or large packets. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, I don't think nobody's hiding any kind of data on that.
No, but it's never in the figures on not on your slide. It's not like we can do this on data rate. We can do this.
I mean, the information I took there from the Trident and from the Tomahawk, it's basically I took it from Broadcom. Okay. So there might be some distinct differences on the actual deployment.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Give them a warm applause.